And another reason we're looking at Mill is because Mill is trying to answer a really important moral question. And it's the sort of question that we tend to forget about. In 201, we read a little bit of Plato, and we read his Euthyphro. One thing he did really well was reason. And what Plato consistently said in his dialogues was, look, you're interested in all sorts of great issues, justice, like the justice of a war. For us, he would say, you're interested in abortion, euthanasia, gun control. And he would say, and it makes sense to care about those things. But you leap in too quickly. You leap into the fray too quickly. Because there's another question you need to ask yourself before you start asking, is abortion morally right or wrong? Do we have a right to gun ownership? Was the Iraq War just or unjust? Is capital punishment just or unjust? Plato says, great questions, but how will you know the right answer if you don't know what makes an act right or wrong in the first place? Or what justice is in the first place? He says that's the question we should be really worried about. What is it that makes something right or wrong in the first place? That's the most basic, the most fundamental question that we can ask. What is moral rightness or goodness? What do all right acts have in common that make them right? Why are some things right and the others wrong? If I can answer that question, then I know what sorts of things to consider when I'm thinking about the abortion issue. But if I can't even give some answer to that question, how in the world do I even know what to look for when discussing abortion? If I can't tell you simply what is it that makes some things right and some things wrong, how will I know when it comes to the really tough issues what is actually right and actually wrong? So Plato says we need to step back and address this question. And this is what Mill is doing. This is what lots of people have done. In Mill's utilitarianism, basically he's just giving you an answer to that question. The right action is the one that maximizes happiness and minimizes pain. Good. Now when thinking about the abortion issue, what would maximize happiness and minimize pain? When thinking about capital punishment, what would maximize happiness and minimize pain? When it comes to practical matters, we all know how to do things in the right order. It's just when we start talking about philosophical matters that we lose our minds. So for instance, if we were on an African safari and you were in a Jeep, I don't know, for some reason it seemed right for all of us to take a class field trip to the safari. You're in a Jeep, you're waiting to leave to go out on safari for the day. I run up to the Jeep, I hand you my camera and I say, do me a favor. If you see a bush baby, take a picture of one for me. And then the Jeep takes off. What is the one question that you would probably like to ask me? What is a bush baby, right? If you're going to go on and search for one, you should probably know what in the world you're looking for, right? Here's the nice thing. You don't even really need to know what a bush baby is. All you have to know is what one looks like. Even if you can't even give the scientific definition of a bush baby, as long as you know what it looks like, you'll know what to look for, right? Or consider how parents teach their children color terms. The child says, what's red? The parent doesn't then wax philosophic about whether red is a primary or secondary quality, or whether colors are spread out all over objects, or where red falls on the electromagnetic spectrum. What do? They point. The child says, define red for me. And the parent says, I don't know how to define it, but it's that thing. And they point to something red, right? That's fine. The problem is we can't do that with morality. Because rightness and wrongness don't look a certain way. They're not a certain shape. They're not a certain color. They don't smell a certain way. So we can't go on the basis of just looks. Wouldn't it be great if every time someone did something wrong, they would start to turn gray? Like the environment was being desaturated with the color? Or every time you did something right, you would hear a beautiful melody or angelic voices, and everything would start to glow. Or every time you did something wrong, you heard a wah wah. We don't have that. So how do we know? How do we know when we're doing what's right or wrong if morality doesn't look a particular way? Now, as Christians, we have an answer, right? How do we figure this stuff out? We've got the answer key. We go to the back of the book and look up the answers. The back of the book is the Bible. But the Bible doesn't give us an answer to everything, unfortunately. God leaves us to figure some stuff out. He tells Adam to name the animals and to group them into kinds. God could have done that for him. Probably would have made life much easier. But God says, no, you do it. You do this scientific task. And unfortunately, God didn't write the Bible in such a way where we just go to the ethics section and say, okay, abortion. Here's what God says. Or euthanasia, or capital punishment, or any other hot moral issue. That doesn't mean the Bible doesn't give us guidance, but it'd be nice if we knew what actually made something right or wrong in the first place, so we can make sure we knew we were applying the Bible correctly. That's the question that Mill is trying to address. That's what we're trying to do. Figure out what it is that makes something right or wrong. And that's how we get the different moral theories. So this is on your lecture outline. The different moral theories are all trying to answer this question. Subjectivism, which we'll talk about next week, says promise keeping is right because you approve of it. You want to know what to do? Figure out what you approve of. Cultural relativists say promise keeping is right because your culture approves of it. That's what it is for something to be right or wrong. Divine command theorists say keep your promises because God tells you to. And the utilitarian says no, keep your promises because it's going to maximize happiness and minimize pain for everyone affected by your action. Now here's the thing. All these theories disagree with each other. They can't all be true. And I'm not even giving you all the theories, so they may all be false, but they can't all be true. They all disagree with one another. And yet, when we think about moral issues, what happens is, based on the situation, we pick and choose which moral theory we want to use. So suppose we're talking about female circumcision, and I think that the United States should not get involved in any way in the issue of female circumcision. There are cases where women come over from another country, and we're told to send them back. And they come over because, well, one of the things they're fleeing is being circumcised, female circumcision. If I think, you know what, who am I to say what's right or wrong? I'll probably use cultural relativism that day, or subjectivism. But cultural relativism and subjectivism aren't always going to yield the right answers for me. So on Sundays, I'll probably use divine command theory to support my views. On other days, I'll reason like a utilitarian. I'll reason as though the end justifies the means. Even though on other days, I will yell at the top of my lungs, the end doesn't justify the means. I will use whatever I need to just to defend my view. Boy, that makes moral reasoning pretty tough, right? If we're just all over the place, and if we're using inconsistent views based on the issue, is it any wonder then that we can't get people to agree with us, or that arguments about important issues tend to produce more heat than light? Is it any wonder that it seems like out there it's just this big confusion of people yelling at each other when we're not even reasoning consistently to begin with? We don't even understand ourselves. How are we supposed to understand the person we're talking to? That's one reason why we need to understand what it is that makes an act right or wrong, so we can figure out what are the most basic moral principles and apply them consistently, and see when others aren't. See when they vacillate between different ones. This is why there's so much entrenched moral disagreement. Because deep down, we don't really disagree about the abortion issue. We disagree about what makes something right or wrong in the first place. We don't really disagree about capital punishment. We disagree about the nature of justice. But since we don't ask that question, we can't figure out Why is it I can't get these people to agree with me? Because we're not asking the right questions. We're not asking them in the right order. That's what Mill is trying to do here. He's asking that most basic question.